United States often draws a lot of flack from the rest of the world for everything.
True.
From its foreign policy to the way it runs its domestic affairs. In fact, it seems like there are few things that can divide the world more evenly and more strongly than asking people what their opinion is of the United States. Everyone has an opinion. Even in the same city, you'll meet people who fall on the extreme sides of the spectrum. But what is it exactly that causes America to be so messed up? Even America's own politicians can't seem to stop talking about how messed up things are. Well, today we're going to take a deeper look. Are things really as bad as everyone seems to think they are? I'm Mike with List 25, and these are 25 common misconceptions about the United States that simply aren't true. And as a very important note, this list was produced by both a United States citizen and 2 European citizens that relocated to the United States.
European, I wonder where in Europe. Was it the UK?
It's written to be as fair as possible. No, I'm not 2 Europeans. Or am I?
You are.
All right, let's begin with a really common thought. Americans are ignorant about the world.
They are.
We fucking hear that all the time. If you ask anyone in the UK, about America, that's probably one of the first things they'll say.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
they'll only know about America. They don't know about nothing else.
Americans are held to an unrealistic standard. Since the rest of the world watch our movies and listen to our music, they know a lot about our country. But let's be honest, they never studied it. People actually complain that Americans don't even know that Czechoslovakia doesn't exist anymore. But neither does half the United Kingdom,
Yeah,
and they're
not-
on the
not a lot
same
of people know
continent.
that.
It turns out that all of us are pretty bad at geography.
I
I think America would be better at
I'm bad as well.
I'm really bad at geography.
But from the videos I've seen online on like when they do like street interviews and that, I've
Yeah.
seen some bad ones come from
Yeah.
America. And I think the UK, they'll get their geography is bad as well, but they can list 3 countries. Like they've been asked name 3 countries. They say Africa. They say like Asia as a country.
Yeah.
Nah, but
it. However, considering another common thought is that America spends its days spying on everyone.
they do.
And that's true. But
See?
who doesn't? Germany, France, Switzerland, Japan, Iceland, and all the rest of us spy on each other and ourselves.
UK
Moving
spy on
on,
people
America
as well, no?
had
I think all countries, all the big
everyone
players
does, yeah.
do. And look at China, they had that spy balloon just floating in the air. That was mad. They had like a bloody balloon floating around.
That's what TikTok was doing as well. They were spyware in
That was
TikTok.
China. Yeah, and that's why it got banned in some countries.
God.
has been called racist. Please don't take this the wrong way. Racism definitely exists.
It's everywhere,
And
racism.
it makes the news. But you know what else? America also has a vicious media, and all of the world watches it, sometimes more than their own media. So when something super bad happens in other countries, it might not even make the back page. Next, it's a common misconception that Americans don't use public transport. While it's true that we use cars a lot, many regions in America have great public transport, or at least just as good as Europe. Besides, what good is a train if nobody can afford it? We're looking at you, UK. Moving on.
My train tickets are fucked, mate. For me to get into London from where I am, it costs like £500 a month. That's a monthly pass. Don't get me wrong. We got the TfL, which is like within London. So if you live in London, you want to get around in London, it is so much cheaper and it's not
No,
expensive.
but it's still costly though.
Yeah, nowhere near to what I'm paying.
When I lived in London, I was working in central London. My ticket every month would be like £200 or something like that. And
It's not cheap.
It depends on the zones that you buy as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, exactly.
God,
Yeah.
America does/has/is fill in the blank. America is far from being a unified entity. Each state has its own laws, cultures, and quirks. Some states have the death penalty.
Every state's like
No.
a country.
Some have strict gun laws, and some don't. Some have free college, some don't. Some have tax, and yeah, some don't. So just like you can't say Europe is so-and-so, you can't say the same about the US. As an additional note, the states are far more independent than many of us realize. In fact, every state even has its own military, known as the
Oh,
Army.
mad. Didn't know that.
Furthermore, some states pass legislation that directly contradicts the federal government. This is because in the US, the federal government is not the highest authority, the states are. To further establish the fact that America isn't a single entity, many believe that Americans only speak one language. But that's no different from the rest of the world. Have you ever been to France? Or
French.
the UK or Italy? Or how about China? Most of them only speak one language too. That being said, over 20% of the US is bilingual.
In the US, you guys in America will comment and tell me, because in the UK, a lot of us, I'm sure you could probably say this as well, when we're in like high school or secondary school, we learn a second language. It's majority of the time going to be French.
Mandarin.
Did I have Mandarin?
I had Mandarin.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, Mandarin wasn't a thing on our one. We had French, German was an option, and Spanish was an option, but French was like the main one.
Yeah.
But the optional ones are like if you want to do additional classes and stuff. So do you guys in America, obviously I know there's lots of states and stuff, but is it common for you to learn another language other than English? And if so, what's the main, like what's the go-to language that a lot of your schools teach you? Because that will be quite
Yeah,
interesting.
that's a good question to ask.
Comment below, guys, what
Yeah.
that is, if there is one, and what language it is.
Now, let's talk about the military, because people outside the US
God.
will preach that America's military does, again, fill in the blank.
Rule the
Nobody
world.
is naive enough to think
Powerful.
that the US doesn't have selfish interests in mind when it invades a country. There isn't a nation on earth that would do that selflessly.
True.
But whenever the bad goes down, it's just as common for other countries to complain that America should do something. On a more or less lighter note,
See, all right.
Americans are fat.
Why is he cracking up at that? Is it because he's overweight and he's laughing?
I think it's just common knowledge as well, though.
Yeah.
America has the largest number of obesity.
And the obesity is very extreme. Like
Yeah.
like in the UK,
It's because of the sugar
yeah,
in their food.
You could vouch for this as well. Like, don't get me wrong, you'll get fat people all over the world. Like in the UK, you get fat people as well. But like when you watch the American shows and there's
They're just
obesity,
massive.
there's ones, their obesity is like they can't even get out of bed, and they're like so big to the point where if they walk one step, they're out of breath. In the UK, like the biggest you'll see, don't get me wrong, is big, but it's probably like nowhere near the normal big of America. And
I
like you
think
said,
it's
it's the
down
sugars.
to portion size as well. Like, for example, if you look at our large McDonald's meal,
Tiny compared to you
their
guys.
large McDonald's will be massive compared to ours.
Our large is like you lot's medium or something.
Yeah.
And
Or
then
even
you lot,
small.
and they got extra large, a lot
Yeah.
of them. So they got the big, like this fucking
Yeah.
Coke cans, Coke bowls.
You ever been to the UK lately? There are even scandals because obese patients are getting turned down for surgery.
Mate, don't ever say America obese is on par or comparable to the UK obese. Trust me, it's not. I promise you. Like, come to the UK, you will see fat people, but it's not like crazy big. We do not get crazy big like
Not
that.
like America.
Not like and
Yeah.
you can't. That one's just invalid, man.
Yes, America does have an obesity problem. But not all citizens are involved in it. I am.
True.
A big part
Poor
of the
guy.
United States is fairly health conscious and is consistently working to help the overweight population better their lives. Thanks, healthy people. And while we aren't perfect, many complain that America is worse than other developed nations in, well, everything. There are many statistics, child mortality, literacy, etc., where the US falls behind countries like Norway and Iceland. But those statistics are based on averages. In Norway, most of the 5 million inhabitants are rich, white, and Norwegian. If you took a similar sample of rich, white Americans in the US, you would find that the statistics are almost exactly the same. The fact is
unfair
that
comparison.
the US is hugely diverse, and the American experience is completely different with and without money. Translation? The problem isn't healthcare or education, it's economic inequality, almost exclusively. And speaking of inequality, many make the simple but powerful assumption that America just isn't safe. This is usually what foreign...
That one we get a lot. Like whenever I don't know, people will talk about America. One of the biggest thing will be the gun laws. They'll say it's unsafe, you know, like all the school shootings that's happening. How can you can't even take your child to school without worrying that they might not come back, which is really messed up at the moment in America. But yeah, like that's the natural thought process of like a lot of UK people when they talk about the safety of America.
Because it's not normal carrying a gun around.
Thing is, you say that, but over there it is.
Yeah, then again, I think it's because we're born and brought up in the UK. It's different for us, whereas for them it's completely normal.
They get very offended, you know. Like I had someone I used to work with, and I heard this from a couple people as well that went to America. They have family there and who are like born and bred in America, and they've got guns. Obviously, it's very normal. And you know, them being in the UK, going to visit that family and asking them like, "Why do you need a gun?" and like, it's not needed, it's not necessary. They get really, really defensive. Because to them, like, you're basically taking away, to them, that's human rights. Having a gun is human rights in their world. Like, that's why it's still going, and they will never, like, the government, if the government turned around and said, all citizens need to hand in their guns tomorrow by 10 o'clock, it would be a fucking civil war, mate. They would not let go of their guns, I promise you.
Why?
To them, it's the Third Amendment or something. It's like, it's literally something so big in America. They'll never do it. Never. They might make it stricter to buy stuff so it's harder to get hold of for the youth, but they'll never just hand it over ever.
Citizens say until they actually come here. By this same logic, Paris, Brussels, London, Madrid, and almost every other city in Europe is unsafe as well. Yes,
True,
there are
London's
guns,
unsafe.
but most Americans have never seen or heard a gun being fired. In fact, most Swiss citizens are much more familiar with gunfire than us Americans. All this being said so far, people still expect all Americans to relish in a life of our stereotypes. Guns, fast food, and freedom! What I'm saying is, a lot of the world looks at America as overly patriotic. But here's an honest question. Have you ever met a Russian, Australian, a proud member of the UK? There's no shame in having pride in your country. Us Americans are definitely patriotic. But so is the rest of the world, as they should be. It's not a crime to be proud of where you came from. But that doesn't stop others from thinking we only complain and boast about America whenever we travel abroad.
I feel like it's because a picture that has been painted for America.
What do you mean?
Like, I feel like I've met Americans before from my previous workplaces, and they are very proud of where they come from. But then it's like, I think anybody's very proud of where they come from. But I think it's different when it's from America.
I feel like the UK, people aren't that proud to be from the UK. A lot of different cultures, from my experience, they're only here for the benefits the UK gives them, like the free education, free this, free that, free housing, or whatever it is, yeah? But when if they was to be asked to fight for the UK and fight for their country, they'll say, no, I'll just go back home.
Because they don't love the country.
They don't love the country. Americans, even if you're like Arab American or African American or whatever it is, they love. They will die for their country, and that's one thing we don't have in the UK.
It's true.
Hence why if we went to war, like, although they're talking about the war, like, I don't know if you guys know, with Russia, the UK are saying we might have to start getting military training for the youth if we go into war with Russia because of NATO or whatever. A lot of people on like Instagram and stuff, they're making memes, but they're serious at the same time, saying, "Oh no, like you told me to go back to my country. Guess where I'm going?" Or do you know what I mean? Like Americans will be that. They'll be like, "Let's pick up our rifles. Let's go." Like that's the difference, and that's why America's very powerful.
This is largely anecdotal. In America, Americans like to complain just like the rest of us. Only a few of them ever even leave the country, so you're meeting an unrepresentative sample. But in their defense, many times, they're right. Yes, this can hit hard in the pride spot, but maybe Europeans could stand to smile a bit more, right?
True.
No?
UK is very grumpy. I think it's the weather. I don't know, man. Everyone's moody in the UK.
I feel like, they're just so grumpy.
Especially in London. Where I am now, which is the outskirts of London, everyone's a lot happy and stuff. Going to London is miserable.
Everyone's just stressed out, grumpy, like smile.
It just feels like a rat race and everyone's just like
God.
moody and shit.
Okay, fine. Back to the apathetic, leave me alone face. By the way, that part was written for our European representative. By our European representative.
Gosh. They'll make, he's probably from the UK.
All
that
of
guy.
you. Anyways, statistics viewed by outsiders show that the US is lagging behind. Similar to topics we've already discussed, there's another factor that we have to take into account. Reporting. Every nation reports its own statistics. This means that making statistical comparisons between two developed nations, like the US and the UK, is an exercise in futility. The data is just too close and won't reveal much except that the US counts people one way and the US counts them another. That still doesn't make this misconception true. Americans are fake. Here's the thing. In Europe, citizens are almost proud of the fact that they're really standoffish. But once you get to know them, they're your friend for life. Well, here's a newsflash. Once you get to know an American, they'll also be your friend for life. The thing is, though, they don't use this as an excuse to be a jerk in the beginning.
It's true,
This
man.
list sounds great coming from an American. I was totally the one who should have read this one, but I digress. On a totally different but very popular misconception, Americans are the only ones who call football soccer.
Oh, here we
Actually, a
go.
lot of the world calls it soccer.
I get
Are we
that.
the only ones that call it football?
Nah, other countries call it football. But the UK, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe football was created by England. England created football and then it got so
As
big.
in like football?
Yeah, football. Yeah.
Yeah.
So soccer, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
that was created by England. So England created it, called it football. Then obviously America took it and called it soccer. For whatever reason, I guess they like American football, which is their like rugby.
Yeah. Their American football is our rugby.
Yeah, it's a bit different
But
though, like the rules and
it's
stuff.
bigger though, isn't it?
It's massive up there.
Yeah.
Yeah. American football's huge.
Even parts of Ireland still call it soccer.
That's
Oh,
interesting.
what do I mean by still? I'm glad you asked. It was actually the British who coined the term soccer. The word soccer is an abbreviation of association and first appeared in universities in the 1880s, sometime using the variant spelled soccer with a K. The word is sometimes credited to Charles Redford Brown, an Oxford University student said to have been fond of shortened forms such as brekkers for breakfast and rugger for rugby football.
Rugger.
Britain actually started using the word football in the late 20th century, possibly because people incorrectly saw it as an Americanism. This next
That
one,
makes sense.
Tristan couldn't believe. Could you not? No. I'm learning something.
Let's see.
To our American viewers, did you know that people in Europe make fun of you for using air conditioning? Why do they need it? Why don't they just leave the window open? Mosquitoes, at least in Florida. But here's why they might be joining us soon. During the 2003 European heatwave, 70,000 people died.
Wow.
This was in large part due to the fact that European homes and buildings are not typically equipped with air conditioning. While they laugh at the Americans for this, hotter summers are going to force them to take appropriate measures. Especially since
I think it's good if a house has
I like air conditioning. It's a luxury. Air conditioners, it's expensive. It's not, something you can just get, I think air conditioning is definitely a luxury.
Especially in the UK, our summer is disgusting. It's just humid, it's sticky, there's
Yeah,
no
it's
air.
sticky heat. It's very different
It's
to
so difficult to sleep at night time. I would love to have air conditioning.
20 degrees in the UK with the sticky heat feels like 35 in other countries. It's
horrible.
nasty. Yeah.
children and the elderly are very susceptible. Again, I stand by mosquitoes. I'm not opening my window in the summer. Winter, absolutely. Open windows. Moving into the top 9. That's the weird number. Top 9. Many parts of the world accuse the United States of accounting for 25% of the world's carbon emissions. Not so nice. But it also accounts for 25% of the world's economic activity. The truth is that several nations, including countries like Canada, have higher per capita emissions than the US. Next, let's talk about how the world thinks Americans are ruining English. Actually,
tomato.
both British English and American English have diverged from a common 16th century ancestral standard And in some ways, American English is closer to the original than British English.
Is it?
For example,
See, I wouldn't know that. You guys correct.
I thought our English is the proper English.
Yeah, I don't know. Apparently, they both got spun off, and their one's what he's saying. Their one's more closer to the
So
original.
tomato.
Don't know. No, tomato.
American English has, for the most part, retained the language's rotosity, pronunciation of the R in words like hard, while British has, for the most part, dropped it.
Hard.
Furthermore, this
Hard.
shift in British English
Hard.
happened around the time of the American Revolution when wealthier Londoners wanted to distinguish themselves from the lower classes. This is only one example, but it goes to show that British English is not an unchanging standard any more than American English. On a totally different note, did you know that Americans don't all live in the suburbs? Nope,
Suburbs.
not true. The fact is that in America, you have plenty of people that live in cities like New York, Washington, D.C., San Francisco, Chicago, Boston, and the list goes on.
Boston.
In fact, several regions of the United States are very European, like the Northeast Corridor, for example. The difference between the US and Europe is that if you want to live in the suburbs in the US, you can, but you don't have to. Now, this next one is just offensive. Americans are all dumb rednecks.
Ah,
While there are certainly Americans who fit this stereotype, the vast majority don't. Most Americans live in cities near the coasts. Most of them are educated, and most of them are not very different from Europeans in any significant way. Every country has a less educated populace that they themselves make fun of.
true.
Even sophisticated nations like Sweden and Switzerland. Fair warning, the last 5 on our list get a bit dark and crazy.
Let's
starting
see.
with the idea that America is imperialistic. In
Imperialistic.
many parts of Europe, the United States is seen as an aggressive imperial power, even more so than Russia and China. This is largely because our military presence both in Europe and everywhere else. But in our strong defense, Americans never forced you to watch our movies, quarter our soldiers, obey our laws, or get permission to leave your own countries. It was the Russians that did that, and much, much more. Food for thought, after World War II, the Americans liberated and left. The Russians liberated and stayed. All right, number 4 is sure to be a shocker to a lot of foreigners. Americans don't actually all walk around with guns. It's just not true.
We just had that talk.
Except for a few places, the only people you'll ever see carrying guns in America are the police. In fact, you'll see
Wow.
more people walking around with guns in Switzerland than you ever would in America. Okay.
That's interesting. Switzerland. I didn't even know Switzerland could hold guns like
Yeah,
that.
I thought it was just America. I mean, not just America in the whole world, but
But like as the big countries,
Yeah.
like the big power countries. That's interesting. I didn't know that.
We admit that, like most stereotypes, there is some truth to this next one, but it's been wildly blown out of proportion. Americans are all crazy Christian right-wingers.
Right
There's
wingers.
something so right about saying it with that accent. Yes, there are a lot of Christians in America, and while some of them are crazy right-wingers, most of them aren't. In fact, if you ever get a chance to go and stay with one of those crazy Christian families, you'll see that most of them are just genuinely sweet people that go to church on Sundays. This next one sounds like a legit stand-up joke. If you get injured and can't pay for it, you'll just die in the street. Yeah,
America's medical care. They'll tell you got a broken bone and they'll bill you like 20k.
I've seen like medical bills if you have a baby in a hospital.
Yeah, I saw those.
It's
Yeah,
like a deposit for a house.
yeah.
Gosh.
That's one thing the UK's got good. Is like stuff like
Yeah.
that.
many people in Europe think this is what happens in America. As with most things that concern America, they're wrong. You can't be denied emergency medical care in the US. That
Just
would
get
go
billed
against
for
the
it.
Hippocratic Oath. The difference is that you get a bill in the mail a few months later. Of course, debt is another issue, but let's get into that right now. Americans are all in debt. Actually, European citizens carry more debt than Americans.
Jeez.
The average household debt in the US, OECD, is 113% of the household's income. In the UK, it's 156%.
I'm not surprised. The UK is very debt heavy, especially now. It's probably the most debt heavy it's ever been. And
In Sweden, 173.
wow.
And in Denmark, it's a whopping 305%.
Oh my
God.
god.
So, what are some misconceptions about the US that you'd like cleared up? Or do you live in America and want to put a stereotype to rest? Let us know in the comments below, or tweet your answer to us at List25.